He was murdered in cold blood with literally millions of witnesses, yet somehow Lee Harvey Oswald's killer died an innocent man. Tonight, America's foremost legal expert, Dan Abrams, reveals the secrets behind this bizarre little corner of the Kennedy conspiracy theories. Plus, he weighs in on Live PD and all of its success. And later, when you start at the bottom, there is only one way to go. It's when you get to the top that things start getting tricky. Carly Fiorina's been there. Entry level to C-suite, Silicon Valley to the presidential debate stage. And tonight, she's right here on Banfield. Hello and welcome to Banfield. If a big-time, high-stakes court case comes along and Dan Abrams doesn't cover it, did it really happen? That's kind of hard to say, because for about a quarter of a century now, there hasn't been a big-time, high-stakes court case that Dan Abrams hasn't covered, impeachments included. He is a lawyer who would rather explain a trial than win one. He is not a cop, but he hosted one of the highest-rated cop shows on TV. He is a best-selling author, a media entrepreneur, and coming soon, he's a winemaker, too. You heard right. He is expanding from sidebars to a bar near you. He also just so happens to be a very dear old friend of mine. So, Dan, oh, wow, look at that old picture with the short hair. What was I thinking? Hi, Dan.
Hello, Ashley. It is great to be with you.
Gosh, I haven't seen you in about 3 inches. How are you? How's been your year?
It's been good. I love that old picture of us. You can
I
go
don't
back
even know where that was.
You could go back and chronicle many years. I'm sure there's many different iterations of that picture over the years.
I think so. I kind of have Hillary hair. I can usually tell where I was and what I was doing by the style and the length of hair. And usually it's because I just got a funky haircut and I wasn't expecting it. But so first of all, I want to do this whole interview with you, and I don't even know where to start, because you're that guy that makes me angry because you accomplish so much in such little bites of time that I get very jealous. But lately, this is your newest thing, and this isn't easy to do. You spat out yet another book. This is the 4th in 4 years, and there was one more before that. I'm going to talk all about the book in a minute, but first, it's how do you get it all done? How do you literally, in 24 hours, get all the work done that you do?
You know, different days, different work takes priority. You know, when I'm working on the book, I literally have to be in the zone. I have to be focused on it for, hours at a time with nothing else, because I can't just sort of dip into the writing for, 45 minutes, et cetera. So, it's about sort of segmenting my time and making sure that, I have enough time to do that tomorrow, et cetera. But I'm also trying to do things that I really enjoy. I'm at that point now where I can kind of pick and choose what I'm going to do. And I'm trying to pick things that don't feel like work. And I have to say that when I'm, for example, in the middle of writing, I'm transporting myself back in time, and it doesn't feel like work. It feels like something that I really enjoy doing.
So we're just, flashing all of your works on camera right now, but I've got to be honest, Dan, I can't even read a book, let alone write one. So, while people are seeing all these things that you just happen to spit out all the time, you're telling me that you just get in the zone. I think our viewers might not even know everything on the list of the stuff you do, and I don't even think this is complete. But you do Court Cam on A&E, Grace versus Abrams. You were, of course, hosting Live PD. You're the chief legal guy on ABC, which is, a very early morning. I did that GMA thing. You have the Law and Crime Network, which is just, an entire TV network, and a satellite radio show, Sirius satellite radio show every single day. So I'm sorry, where exactly do you carve out little bits of time to write a book in between debating Nancy Grace?
Yeah, for the radio show, for example, I am from 2 to 3, Monday through Friday. And, I'll say that, maybe it starts a little bit earlier. But part of the beauty of the radio show is that I'm talking about stuff that I'm doing in other aspects of my life most of the time. So it doesn't require a ton of preparation, because I've been, dealing with the topics that we're going to be talking about in other areas. So I try and do synergies, right? Where there are things that are overlapping, where one thing can help the other. And, I think that makes it all work.
So of all of the stuff that you've done, I didn't even mention you were also, president of MSNBC at one point too. And I kept thinking, what on earth does this guy, is he made of a cyborg? Or of all those things, I know you get recognized on the street. I know people know who you are, but do you think it was Live PD that just sort of made you astronomically famous?
Well, I don't know if I'm astronomically famous, but I will say
I
will say that Live PD was definitely a different level in terms of, the recognition throughout the country, right? I mean, cable news is a pretty segmented community. Now, recently, it's sort of exploded, right? It's become the top shows on television, our cable news shows very often. But Live PD was something different because it was, not New York and Washington and LA and Miami, where, I am typically or had been typically known. It was Midwestern cities. It was outside of the coasts, where the heart of the Live PD audience was. And, one of the things, as from Live PD was, taking so seriously what we call the Live PD Nation, was appreciating that community of people who were so invested in the show. And I don't think I've ever had something like that where, I have shows where people are like, oh yeah, Dan Abrams, yeah, I like what you do, great. With Live PD, it was different. It was like, it's a community of people who were so passionate about the show that, it really, really was a different kind of experience, and one that I'm hoping will come back again.
Yeah, so we're just looking at pictures with, Tom Morris and Sean Sticks Larkin, who also have become extremely famous. And you're right. I think it would depend where you land, in what airport you're in. If you're in Tulsa, Dan Abrams has to run from all the autograph seekers, et cetera. Same with Sticks. And so that leads me to this question. Particularly Sticks, right? You should see his Insta. So it would lead me to this next question, Dan, and that is this. If it was so incredibly popular, if it was the #1 show on television, why would A&E have had to cancel it? Why could they not have incorporated it into the larger conversation that America needs to be having with people and police, as opposed to just wiping it and saying this never happened?
Well, look, you'd have to ask someone at A&E that question. I was very clear when the decision was made that I was not happy about it. And since that decision was made, I have been advocating for its return. And I am confident that it will return in some way, shape, or form in the relatively near future, because of all the reasons you're saying, which is because it was too popular, because the audience was truly devoted, because I don't think Live PD was the problem. And for all those reasons, I expect it will be back. But with regard to why it got canceled, I can assure you I wasn't part of that decision making.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our viewers, especially when we have the guys on to talk about policing in America, people flock to the show. It's like they're starving to get that show back. But there's more to it than just the entertainment. There's the notion of how America feels about policing. And a lot of these guys are really hardworking and they're heroic and they take bullets. And I'm too scared to do that. So they're not getting a lot of the appreciation that they're due. And there are the bad apples that are causing, really, really difficult situations for Black Americans. And I think that's a legitimate conversation. But if we're not prepared to have it, if the answer is just don't show them anymore, are we going to get better, Dan? Are we going to come to terms with who we are as Americans who need police officers?
Yeah, look, I certainly don't believe that's the answer. I don't think that defunding police is the answer. I think that part of the value of body cams, right, which it seems that people of all stripes are supporting, political stripes of the left and the right, et cetera, that people seem to be generally in agreement that body cams are a good thing to have. And so if that's the case, then it would seem to me that live PD fits in perfectly with that mission and with the mission of transparency. And, look, I think that there were a lot of discussions about exactly, what happened in certain county, et cetera, that, that can be addressed, right? But the big picture is that, live PD was in over 50 places. There was like 1,000 hours of footage that came in every week, et cetera, on live PD. And it does show what police officers do on a daily basis. And I know that in the news media, in the news world, right, it's only the sort of the moments, right? It's either the moments of horrible policing or in certain cases, although far more rarely, heroism. But then there's everything else that happens with police officers every day, what they do every day, what they deal with every day. And that's what live PD showed. And I think it's an important thing for the public to see.
My mom, once told me that she had joined the board of a women's shelter and was invited to be part of a ride-along. This was many years ago. And she had her eyes opened to the realities of policing like she'd never had before, even though she knew the stories behind the women that came into the women's shelter. And I felt like when you launched the show, I was getting the same images and viewpoint that she got that really important night that affected how she made decisions in her community. And I wonder about the comments that I hear from some people that if you put a TV camera on police officers, they become more aggressive. I sort of felt the opposite. I felt like they were more restrained. Like I wanted to reach through the camera sometimes and belt the guy that was spitting on the officer or taking pot shots or calling him all sorts of profanity. Where do you think that comes from, this criticism that the officers act more aggressive when they're on camera?
Well, look, I think there are some people who just want to criticize, period. Initially, the criticism was that officers are going to be they're going to be on their best behavior and that it's going to be unrealistic in how they behave. And now some other people are saying, or some of the same people are saying, oh, no, it's actually going to lead them to be more aggressive. Look, Ashley, you and I have had a lot of experience with cameras in courtrooms, right? And the same argument is always made about a camera in court, which is, oh, my goodness, the lawyers are going to be showboating. Oh, it's going to turn everything into a circus. It's going to fundamentally change the proceeding. And we know that that just doesn't happen. That when you watch trials, despite the fact that what everyone says about how it's going to change everyone's behavior, it doesn't. And remembering that police officers, again, with body cams, are now using body cams anyway, that what they're doing is going to be scrutinized. And so I just don't understand this notion that somehow it makes police officers so fundamentally different than what they do every day. And because the reality is the vast majority of police officers are good police officers. And there are going to be some bad police officers. And if the bad police officers are seen on camera being bad police officers, that too is a good thing, that people are able to see that. And so I think that that's the beauty of something like live PD showing what is happening with policing in America.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with the cameras in the courtroom. I've said all along, ever since starting work at Court TV, where you also had a great start, that it's a transparency that Americans should be so grateful for, to be able to be a part of the process and to learn about the process. You can't go down to your local courthouse every day, but you sure can turn on your TV in the break room. Dan, I'm going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about this. I'm psyched about it. It's a murder that shook an already shell-shocked world and a trial that is now almost completely forgotten. So if we saw these images live on TV, how come Jack Ruby is still technically an innocent man? Dan will tell you next. We're back with journalist, analyst, best-selling author Dan Abrams, TV host, and I'm sure somewhere in his spare time he's probably an astronaut. However, this is what I want to talk about now, Dan. Kennedy's Avenger. So Gosh, I thought I knew everything about this case. And here you are to school me that Jack Ruby died an innocent man after we all watched over and over him pull the gun out and charge into that Sally Port in Dallas and shoot Lee Harvey Oswald in the belly live on TV. We all saw it happen. And I remember a verdict and I remember a death sentence. And yet, what happened?
So I have to tell you that I didn't even remember the death sentence when I first started looking into this case. My co-author, David Fisher, and I were looking for our next book related to presidents, right? Because all of them, Lincoln, we had a great trial that Lincoln had argued, Teddy Roosevelt as a defendant, John Adams as an attorney in the Boston Massacre trial. And we were talking about the JFK assassination, Oswald was killed, so there was no trial. And then we're like, whatever happened with the Jack Ruby trial? And we both sort of looked at each other thinking, yeah. And we ended up digging in on it, and it was fascinating. This was the trial of that decade, with Jack Ruby effectively serving as the defendant in the Kennedy assassination. Many of the Kennedy conspiracy theories came out of this trial. And as you point out, he was convicted. He got a death sentence, and an appellate court then overturned that conviction, saying that they used statements from him that shouldn't have been admitted into the trial, and there should have been a change of venue out of Dallas, and that there should be a new trial. And by the way, I think that at the new trial, Ruby would have pursued a very different defense and might have been out with time served based on the way Texas law was at the time, but he died in prison a few months after he won the appeal from cancer.
Like what kind of defense? I mean, like I said, there were millions of witnesses. I don't know that there's another crime out there with millions of live witnesses.
So the defense in the trial ended up being a sort of insanity defense, meaning his lawyer, his very high profile, famous lawyer, argued that he didn't even remember the incident occurring because he had a rare kind of epilepsy, which led him to have an epileptic seizure. And that he doesn't recall the event at all. And so that should be a not guilty verdict. That didn't work. What would have worked is in Texas law at the time, if you were convicted of murder without malice, effectively manslaughter today, it's 2 to 5 years in prison. That was the sentence. And so he had already served 3 years by the time that his new trial was happening. I think that he either would have pled guilty to the charge or maybe gone to trial, been found guilty of the lesser crime. And prosecutors still wanted to pursue the malice, the murder with malice charge. But I think if Ruby testified and he got on the stand and he said, I got angry, I got upset, I walked into the police station, 30 seconds later, Oswald is being brought past me, I pulled out my gun and I lost it. I think that would have worked. But that's not the defense that they pursued.
Well, and it's, you and I both know, and so do all the trial watchers out there, insanity defenses aren't often pursued because in fewer than 1% of the cases they're employed, and then there's a fraction of those that actually prevail. So, has anything really changed despite the Hinckley effect on the insanity defense?
No, and I think this is a case where his lawyer, who was probably the most famous lawyer in the country at the time, Melvin Belli, wanted the all-out win, right? He was a big showman, and he's thinking, I can get an acquittal for that guy who shot Oswald live on TV? Then I'm the greatest legal magician in the history of the country. And
I'm that generation's Jose Baez.
Yeah. Jose Baez. Yeah. I think that's what he thought he would get. And he was furious. One of the great moments in the book is after the jury comes back with its verdict, this well-known lawyer starts yelling at the jurors, screaming at them about, how they're horrible and they're racist and they're, because part of the thing was that Jack Ruby was Jewish and he was accusing them of being anti-Semitic. And, it was all sorts of accusations coming from Melvin Belli when that conviction came. But I'll tell you, it was after the case that it was almost more interesting than the trial itself, meaning he ends up talking to the Warren Commission, which was the commission established to investigate the cause of Kennedy's death, whether it was a conspiracy. He's sitting there talking to the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Earl Warren. He's demanding a lie detector test from Warren, saying, "Sir, I want a lie detector test. I need a lie detector test." And then finally, Earl Warren agrees, but just says, "Look, let's talk for now, and then I'll get you the lie detector test." And then there's a separate interview where Ruby does get the lie detector test, and he passes, saying he had no connection with Lee Harvey Oswald. He acted alone. He wasn't part of a conspiracy, et cetera. But again, while conspiracy wasn't part of the trial, there was sort of this specter of the conspiracy. And we talk about all the sort of references that are made to possible conspiracies that come up during the trial of Jack Ruby as well.
Yeah, that was when we had commissions to investigate these things. Sorry, it's my news. I can't take my news hat off. But by the way, can I just ask you if you think that things had gone differently with Jack Ruby's appeal, and maybe he had actually prevailed in his appeal, do you think that it would not have spawned the conspiracy industry surrounding Kennedy?
Well, so as you know, he won the appeal, and I think that part of the conspiracies became that someone killed him in prison before he gets to have his new trial. So the one of the conspiracies is that 3 years later, or almost 3 years later, that Ruby is being killed in prison so they can silence him. I mean, the problem with the conspiracies are that they believe that Ruby silenced Oswald, right? Even though it happened 2 days later and Ruby was at the police station and could have killed him on the day that he was arrested. But then who's to silence Ruby, right? I mean, if Ruby's part of this, you got to keep hiring hitmen to silence the last person. And you know, we lay out in the book some of the facts that make it very difficult to believe that Jack Ruby was part of a conspiracy just based on the timing of when he arrived at the police station on the day that it happened and when Oswald was supposed to be moved.
Well, there's just nothing like talking about presidents in court cases. So when we come back after the break, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on the Manhattan District Attorney and the New York Attorney General and what they are now looking into when it comes to our former President Donald Trump. That with Dan Abrams right after this. My guest tonight is one of those rare folk who may be just as big as a law and crime geek as I am. Dan Abrams actually named a network, Law and Crime, left off the geek. So I teased out to break, let's talk about Donald Trump, because that's, you know, you got to be setting up a new filing cabinet for this one, right? Because there's lots coming. Obviously, if the AG in New York and the Manhattan DA are working in concert and there's taxes and there's bank records and, you know, there are all these things coming, you know, forward. Do you think that the CFO of the Trump Organization is going to be the linchpin in all of this?
You know, it could be. It totally depends on whether he ends up cooperating with the authorities. And when I say cooperating, you know, I think he's already done interviews, et cetera. The question is, does he cooperate in the way that they want to? And it's not just him. Remember, it's also his son, who also works for the Trump Organization as well. Look, in this kind of case, the documents become the linchpin. So with or without Alan Weisselberg, it is looking like all the signals would point towards an indictment. Doesn't mean he definitely will be indicted. But if this weren't Donald Trump, and we were just talking about the facts of the case, which is tax returns are fought over for years, all the way to the Supreme Court. They get them. Then the DA's office hires, out of private practice, a very well-known, established white-collar lawyer to oversee the prosecution investigation. Then this special grand jury is impaneled. All of that, putting aside whether it's Donald Trump or Donald Jones, all of that points to the likelihood of an indictment. Now, that is going to be based, if there is one, largely on documents, regardless of whether Alan Weisselberg cooperates or not. But he could certainly be very helpful to them if that's the way they're going.
you know, someone who's helpful is Alan Weisselberg's son's ex-wife. Because
Right.
hell hath no fury. But I don't even think that's the reason. I think she got the subpoenas and the documents were in her apartment. So they're now in the hands of the authorities. But I do want to ask you if there is an indictment and there is a trial. Manhattan is a very different place than, say, the middle of the country or places where a lot of Trump supporters live and work.
Yeah.
Do you think he has any hope of prevailing in a Manhattan courtroom with a Manhattan jury?
Look, I don't know what the evidence is, right? I'd have to answer that question. I'd have to know what kind of evidence they have. But I will tell you,
a lot of ifs.
yeah.
There.
Well, I'll tell you this. Is that people always ask about, can you find a fair jury? And the example I like to cite is the O.J. Simpson civil case in Santa Monica, right? Which is, the world has just watched in Los Angeles the trial of O.J. Simpson in downtown Los Angeles. And then less than a year later, they have to go and try and find a jury in Santa Monica that can fairly evaluate the evidence in that case. And I will tell you, from watching jury selection in that case, there were an enormous number of people. Yeah, they all knew something about the case. Oh, yeah, Johnny Cochran, but they didn't follow the case that closely. And I think that you're going to be able to find a lot of people, even in Manhattan, who aren't that highly politicized that they couldn't decide a case fairly. You're going to have to figure out a way to keep off the typical left-wing Manhattanite off the jury who, wants to get Donald Trump back in some way, shape, or form. You have to be able to do that. And again, I think that they would be able to do that in the event of an indictment. I think that jury selection, that, people are surprised at how often you can find fair jurors, even in the highest profile or most controversial of cases.
Yeah, and I have always said, under the great tutelage of you and the Jack Fords of the world and those people who are really good TV lawyers, there are some very good ones, that cases can be won or lost in jury selection and often are. So quick question for you, because I think this is going to be some insight that I would not know, even though I know you. We do this thing on the show. It's adorable. It's called Table for Two. And we put you at a table, Dan, and the seat across the table is empty. And you can pick anybody you want, living or dead, to fill that seat. Who would you choose to sit through whatever that meal is at your table for two?
All right. So this is going to sound incredibly self-promotional, and it is. Right now, who's the guy I'd want at the table? I'd want to talk to this guy, Jack Ruby.
Aren't you sick of him?
I'd want to talk to Jack
Ruby. Oh, yeah.
Can I tell you how much I've been in his head lately and getting to know him without knowing him? So today, if you were to say to me, who do you want to sit across from? I want to talk to Jack Ruby. I want to understand a little bit better about what he did, why he did it, how he did it, et cetera. And, that as of today, now next year, when another book comes out, I may give you a different answer. But today, that's my guy.
But with 30 seconds left, you just got to tell me, what would, if you only had one question for him, what would it be?
It would be, take me to the moment when you're standing there watching Oswald walk out. What is it that triggered you? What is it? And this is assuming that Ruby was sane, right? By the end of his life, he
You're
really
at two questions now, Dan. You know how TV works. 30 seconds, you had two questions.
Just one question. Just what were you thinking at that moment? I'm just saying that I was just giving a caveat to say it would have to be at a time when Ruby still had all his mental faculties such that he could answer the question. But that would be the question.
Okay.
What were you thinking at that
Dan,
moment?
the book is called Kennedy's Avenger. I love you to pieces, and you know that. I don't even have time to list all the other stuff you've done, but thank you for being on. And then also, coming up, a woman who went boldly where no woman has ever gone before, Carly Fiorina, talking about the world that she conquered and the one that she didn't. After the break. Welcome back. Being first doesn't make you best, but it does make you different. It makes you something that no one else can be, something no one can take away. And depending on the field, it can be difficult or it can be damn near impossible. And my next guest chose 3 fields, all from the damn near impossible category. In high tech and in business, Carly Fiorina surged to the tippy top, and she made history doing it. In politics, she aimed high and she came a lot closer than most of us would. Today, she is a highly sought-after leadership consultant, author, and speaker, and I'm pleased she is also a guest of mine tonight. It's good to see you, Carly Fiorina. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Ashley. Great to be with you.
So let me start off with the big story. You were running for president. We don't have a female president yet, but we do have a female vice president. She's just not from your party. I'd love for you to weigh in on that first from the Democratic Party.
Well, you know, the day that now President Biden declared that he would choose her as his running mate, and again, when they won the election, I congratulated her. I congratulated her for being first, because anytime someone breaks a barrier, and she has broken so very many, it reminds all of us of the possibilities of this country, and this country is all about possibilities, and it also makes it a little bit easier for everyone else. And so, Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. It is a cause for celebration when a Kamala Harris becomes Vice President of the United States.
So let's talk about President of the United States. That was a job you wanted. You ran for the Republican nomination and ultimately voted for the other guy, the other top of the ticket, Joe Biden. I have so many questions about that, but let's just start with, how do you think Joe Biden is doing?
Well, you know, actually, I think Joe Biden is doing quite well so far. I don't agree with how he is doing everything. What I mean by that is, I think that he is over-reliant on the traditional Democrat Party's methodology of creating huge federal programs to solve absolutely every problem, when we know that huge federal programs sometimes create as many problems as they purport to solve. However, I agree very much with his goals. I agree that we need to tackle crumbling infrastructure. I agree that we need to tackle the things that hold people back in this country, whether it's access to education or healthcare or debt. I agree that we need to finally tackle climate change in a serious science-based way. So I agree with his goals, and I also agree with how he addresses the nation. He doesn't take the bait in terms of being angry or overly partisan or critical of others. I think he has stuck to his campaign promise to try and unify the nation. Again, I don't agree with him on policy every time. I don't agree with him on methodology every time. But I endorsed and voted for Joe Biden because, as I said at the time, leadership matters and character counts. And I think he's demonstrated his character through a lifetime. And I think he is demonstrating leadership now as he has throughout his life.
So I'm listening to your answer, and I'm navigating through some of the stuff between the lines. And I know you're not a huge fan of Donald Trump, but there are a lot of Republicans who still are. And I'm curious that if some of the things you just said are considered sacrilege now, if you're a Republican, and if that's the case, are you still a Republican, or is there now a whole new subset of Republicans that need a new name?
Well, you've asked a lot of questions in there, so let me sort of tackle them one at a time. First, I would say that, yes, there are some Republicans who would vehemently disagree with everything I just said, and who certainly vehemently disagreed with my decision to vote for Joe Biden. There are also, I think, Democrats who should think carefully about why the charge of socialism seems to stick. I think there are Democrats who should think carefully about why Donald Trump actually got more votes in 2020 than he did in 2017. All those people aren't crazy, and all those people aren't stupid. However, my real departure with many Republicans has been over statements and points of principle. As a matter of principle, you cannot have a president of the United States on the campaign trail saying the only way I lose is if the election is stolen. As a matter of principle, you cannot have a former president of the United States continuing to say that the election was stolen. As a matter of principle, your whole platform as a president or as a party cannot be it's us or them. It cannot be anger and division. We'll see what happens to the Republican Party over the long haul. I can just tell you what I believe. And what I believe is that power concentrated is power abused, that people closest to the problem know best how to solve the problem, always, if given the opportunity and the resources to do so, and that every human being is filled with limitless potential. And then in this country, we have to make sure that they have access to those things they need to be able to fulfill their potential. And we don't yet do that in this country.
So this country is still an experiment. I mean, we're pretty new at this game, globally speaking, right? Democracy, and everyone's sort of screeching, oh dear, democracy's in peril right now. And I wonder if it is because of, you say we'll see how things are going to shake out, but conversations like we're having right now are part of the we'll see. It's the creation, right? We're molding it as we speak. Are you in the Liz Cheney camp, who said, I'm not going to go along with this. I'm going to say what Carly Fiorina just said, the election wasn't stolen? Or are you in the Mitch McConnell camp, who said, Cheney, you got to go? Because we know that Mitch McConnell doesn't believe that the election was stolen, but he wants Liz Cheney not to say that.
Yeah. Well, I'm clearly in the Liz Cheney camp and publicly stood up for her in the media. And have publicly said consistently that democracy is in peril when one of our two principal political parties continues to allow many, many leaders of its party to foment the illusion that the election was stolen. So yes, I believe democracy is in peril when people who are elected leaders continue to fan the flames of an election being stolen. It's why I speak out, because I think people need to speak out. It's why I applauded Liz Cheney. And it's why I think it is appalling that she was driven from her leadership post.
I have to squeeze in a quick break, Ms. Fiorina. I feel like you're too big a deal to call Carly, even though I feel like I feel like I know you. I've seen you on television so much, but at the same time, it's because Fortune magazine named you the most powerful woman in American business 5 years running. But at the same time, SNL parodied you and had a whole lot of fun. I want to know, when we come back, which one was better in terms of being a bigger deal? When SNL takes you on or when Fortune magazine does? That's next with Carly Fiorina.
You want to talk about Putin? I know Vladimir Putin personally. I sold him an HP printer, and now he hates my guts. It doesn't work. It never worked. And when Putin calls me to...
We are back now with former CEO, former GOP presidential hopeful, and lifelong trailblazer, Carly Fiorina. Is that it? Like, when you're parodied on SNL, is it a bigger deal than running for president or being the head of Hewlett-Packard?
I have to say, honestly, no, but maybe all the SNL fans out there will be disappointed. I mean, look, of course, that's cool. But, you know, maybe this is an odd thing to say, but fame is not what this has ever been about for me. And honestly, fame is not what it's cracked up to be. On a serious note, if I may say, first of all, of course, you can call me Carly Ashley. My enemies call me Carly. You certainly can. But on a serious note, you know, when Fortune magazine came out with that inaugural edition of the most powerful women in business, and at that first edition, I was #1 and for 6 years thereafter. But at that time, the very first edition, I told them, I'm flattered, I'm honored. But if you want to highlight women in business, don't number us 1 to 50. And they then subsequently went through this big deal where women would fall in their numbers. Oh, she used to be 20, now she's 30. I said, don't do that. Because that implies that business is like tennis or golf. You know, there's the men's ladder and there's the women's ladder. You don't have the 50 most powerful men in business. Business should be an arena where everyone gets to play. And where the arena is better when everyone gets to play.
Yeah, I think it's the same in television. You know, you got the Rachel Maddows of the world and you've got the Sean Hannitys of the world, and nobody, you know, categorizes them as men or women. They're just either ratings blockbusters or not. But fame is an interesting little animal because we've now had a president who, you know, floated into that office with a lot of fame to start with. And now other people, you know, like Matthew McConaughey and, you know, famous folks are now assuming that maybe that's their trajectory, that public office after being an actor or an actress is or a reality star is what's now required to get the votes. I don't mean required for the office, but I mean required for the votes. So in that respect, it's kind of necessary. And does that worry you?
Yes, it worries me greatly. Look, we are set politics aside just for a moment. Our culture has become celebrity or fame obsessed. Everybody's after their 15 minutes of fame, as opposed to impact or contribution obsessed. There are many, many famous people who make no contribution, really honestly, who don't have a real impact. But we also have become a culture that is controversy obsessed. We love controversy. We love conflict. And Trump used both of those to become president. Yes, he used his fame and his celebrityhood from Celebrity Apprentice, but he also stoked controversy and conflict. And we love that. The media loves it. All kinds of media love conflict and controversy. And we're obsessed with both. And democracy, to really function, citizens need to understand that citizenship is an opportunity, but it's also a responsibility. All of us can make an impact and a contribution in our communities and in our spheres of influence. And despite being very different in very many ways, we have to be united by a common set of principles and ideals and aspirations. And what troubles me most is I think so many Americans don't either believe in those principles or those ideals or those aspirations anymore, or they don't actually know what they are.
Would you, I mean, you've been in the arena a couple of times. Would you run for president again or for anything again?
Well, who knows? I never say never. I certainly don't have any current plans. And I think politics has become a very toxic place, unfortunately. And I also think politics is not particularly about problem solving, which is why I got into politics. Politics has become about winning. To your previous question. By the way, George Washington in 1789, our first president, warned us about this. He said the trouble with political parties is they will come to care only about winning and not governing. And I think we're sort of seeing that. So if it's just about the winning, I don't really honestly have a lot of interest. If it's about problem solving, and we have a lot of problems in this country, and impact and contribution, then that's where I like to spend my time and where I spend my time these days.
Okay, well, if you make that decision, would you consider making it on this program? And you can call me Ashley when you do it.
Wow, now that's leading. Let's see, I have no current plans. I've said politics, it's toxic, but just in case all that changes, yeah, I guess I could tell you I'll come on your show.
Amen, sister. It's good to see you. You look beautiful. And I'm not just saying that because of what Trump said. You really do. I'm always miraculous about women who look so gorgeous in, you know, COVID times in their houses. And look at you. You look like a studio. You got a glam squad there. Anyway, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you for this, Carly.
Thank you so much, Ashley. All the best.